Welcome all to today's webinar, IT Asset Management, the Path to Savings, Security, and Sanity. My name is Rachel Wells, and I will be moderating today's discussion. So first, a little bit about ITS Partners. So we are a leader in managing and securing critical assets and infrastructure, primarily using the ServiceNow platform. We are a strategic ServiceNow elite partner with 4 decades of IT expertise focused on security and asset management. We help customers achieve outcomes such as cost savings, increased efficiency, and balanced staffing levels as we work to understand your goals, build the roadmap, and lead you to success. Today's expert panelists collectively have decades of experience helping customers successfully improve their asset management capabilities by embracing a full technology asset lifecycle. So joining us today, we have first Terry Bobst, ITAM Practice Director. Terry has over 25 years of experience in the IT world, focused in ServiceNow for over 8 years, and has been dedicated to asset management for over 12. Terry lives on a farm with her husband. They have over 60 animals. Thanks for being here, Terry.
Thank you.
Yeah, next we have Adam. Adam Smith Carnes is a product marketing manager on the ServiceNow asset management team. He has worked in multiple marketing roles for nearly 20 years with a focus on IT. In addition to his lively marketing career, Adam has also been an instructional designer, freelance writer, customer advocacy leader, diversity, equity, and inclusion leader, a life coach, and a martial arts instructor. Thanks for being here, Adam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, guys, to get started, I would love to kick us off with a poll question. So let me go ahead and launch that poll. Okay, it is launched. So you should be seeing a poll. So we have 2 questions. The first one is, how do you manage your IT assets today? And then the second one is, what is your top priority for implementing a comprehensive ITAM solution? So we posted the polling questions on your screen, and we ask that you pick the one issue that keeps you up at night. So the first one, how do you manage your IT assets today? Maybe you don't have an ITAM program today. Maybe you use basic spreadsheets, but no specific IT asset management solution. Maybe you have legacy point applications that don't provide a complete solution. ServiceNow ITAM solutions, or a little bit of everything. So that's the first one. I'll give you a minute to go ahead and fill that in. The second question, what is your top priority for implementing a comprehensive ITAM solution? Maybe you track hardware assets, comply with regulatory requirements, mitigate security risks, hardware and software cost reduction and license optimization. Maybe your top priority is improving process and data sharing, or maybe you just want it all. All right, so I'll give you another minute to go ahead and fill in your responses. All right, so the first one, how do you manage your IT assets today? So it looks like a lot of you do use ServiceNow ITAM solutions, which is awesome. Some of you said a little bit of everything, which I'm not sure Terry's and Adam's surprised by that. Second question, what is your top priority for implementing a comprehensive ITAM solution? Majority of you said you want it all. So Terry, from your experience, is this what you typically find with ITS customers?
Yeah, so I'm thrilled to see that so many of you are already using the ITAM solutions within ServiceNow, because that is the the best way to manage your ITAM program, hands down. I know that everyone, when they start talking about it, they do want a little bit of everything, or they are using a little bit of everything. Spreadsheets are very common, some legacy databases, SharePoint, sticky notes. We've really seen it all as far as managing your IT assets. So moving into the ServiceNow platform and using the solutions there is fantastic, and has really put you on your way to that maturity journey for your ITAM program. Really not surprised by number 2 at all. Everybody, they want it all. And really, if you're using a solution such as the ServiceNow platform, where it is comprehensive and everything is on the same platform, that's really what you can get. You can get it all with your ITAM program by utilizing the tools from the ServiceNow platform.
And Adam, with your experience, is this what you're typically seeing at ServiceNow?
Yeah, we see it kind of all over the board as well. And just like Terry was pointing out, there are different things like on question 1 about legacy points solutions, as well as a bit of everything. And I am happy that you're using ITAM solutions from ServiceNow, those who are. Hopefully you're getting great results. I love the fact that you have 2 questions up here. I haven't seen that before. And so as I was watching the results come in, that was kind of fun to watch. So, and I want it all, I think we'll get to that just a little bit later in the discussion, because there were some interesting things that we had when we did a recent survey at ServiceNow with EMA partners, and it was kind of interesting to look at some of those results as well. Some of them were interesting, and some of them were kind of astonishing. And this would be one of those that I would put slightly in the astonishing category, because if you add the first one, if you go to the little build there, if you go to that unified approach to life cycle across all asset types, you're looking at somebody who's trying to build it on a platform or build it on something that they can integrate all other areas of IT with it as well. And then if you look at the third one down, the good life cycle management, but cloud separate, that's pretty close. That's kind of a hybrid approach, pretty close to the same. So you've got well over 50% who are looking for that kind of one solution that fits most needs. What's interesting though is that hardware, software, cloud, and non-IT assets handled differently. There was a quote that came from this survey that basically said they saw that type of structure that they had in their organization created a lot of silos and a lot of difficulty between cross-domain functions and workflows. And so that's an important thing to note. If you go to the next one, Rachel, there were a couple of other things to note about this. Now, I noticed security in one of those questions. It's funny because almost every one of these survey questions that we had, security scored really high. And people use their asset management data in order to look at security and security issues and look at vulnerabilities. And as you go down that list, it's a pretty comprehensive list. And then down in the corner, you have other responses like regulatory compliance and strategic initiatives and accurate information for troubleshooting and so forth. There's a lot of good answers there. But the biggest gap you notice there is, I don't know if there's a build on this one too, Rachel, is there? Maybe with the security, yes. So the security one, you'll see the biggest gap there between number 1 and number 2, almost 20 points higher. And so everybody is looking at their asset management, especially when they're doing it right, to manage security issues. So, and I think if you go to the next one, this was another interesting part of it, because instead of asking for their insights on what's going on in their environments now, we asked, what do you think will be happening in the next 18 months? And a couple of things were a little bit surprising to us was the number 1, and that is expansion beyond IT assets. So people who are managing assets or who are involved with asset data are looking at what can we bring in from IoT or operational technology or edge or enterprise assets, things that aren't normally the bread and butter of what asset managers do. So you can also see they see it being highly involved in the automation. But I also want to point out, in the middle of the list, this was the only one where security ended up in the middle and not at the top. And maybe that's because security is so painful for people that they hope that in 18 months, it's not there. So, pushing those pains out. So anyway, those were some interesting insights. Terry, from any of this, does this ring true with some of your customers or other things you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. So I really like that it emphasizes the fact that organizations are realizing how far-reaching the impact of their ITAM program can be for their business. It's not just IT assets. I really, really like, I'm excited about the fact that they want to expand beyond IT assets. I think any of us that have been doing ITAM for a while know that it's process driven and that you can really use the processes that you build and develop in your ITAM space to expand into into OT and enterprise assets and kind of build on what you've already learned to help expand those and mature those programs as well. And I also really like, when you talked about the silos, that it really points out that you need overall governance for your ITAM program so that you can prevent those silos, so that you have someone that's looking at IT asset management program as a whole and understanding how HAM ties into that and SAM ties into that, and even how the CMDB supports that so that it can prevent those silos from happening.
Agreed.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing this with us. So let's kick off the panel with a first question. So Terry, how would you define IT asset management? And then what are the tangible benefits of implementing an ITAM solution?
All right, you bet. So we could talk about IT asset management all day. It's one of my favorite topics. I've dedicated my career to talking about it. So it's a good thing it's one of my favorite topics. This slide is, and really it just shows all of the different components of asset management. And it talks about ITAM being a set of business practices that join your financial, contractual, inventory functions. And then of course, HAM, SAM, contracts, cloud, those are all part of your ITAM program. But really beyond that, ITAM is understanding the full life cycle of your hardware, software, services within your organization. It's knowing what you need, what you have, where it is, and how you use it in order to make informed decisions about how you spend your money and how you protect your organization from risk. It's also really important to note that ITAM does not stand alone. It's connected to every part of your business. It's connected to service management, change management, security, as Adam's slides pointed out, compliance, human resources, procurement, financials, etc. It's really connected to everything that you do within your business. And also can't express this enough that ITAM is not a project. It's a program. There is no end date. It has to be an ongoing practice within your organization that you really give enough attention and enough staffing to keep it maintained for it to provide business value. All right, you're going to go to the next slide. So some of the benefits when we talk about asset management, of course, are to control inventory that's purchased, reduce cost, manage your asset lifecycle. Asset lifecycle, that is something you guys are going to hear, I don't know, a lot, a lot through this webinar, because really, when you talk about building an ITAM program, it's all about managing that lifecycle. Achieving compliance with standards and regulations, improving service to end users, creating standards and processes for managing assets. A lot of those people think of on a regular basis. I think one that probably is kind of surprising is improving service to end users. Having a good ITAM program can really improve your onboarding experience and your user experience in general. How long does it take you to get a new employee ready to do work? Is that day one when they start because you have really good processes in place? Or are they sitting around for a week waiting for their equipment and their software to be able to do their job? So that's a really big benefit of having a good asset management program. Adam, before we move on, is there anything else you'd like to add to the benefits of asset management?
That's a great list. I just want to emphasize and re-emphasize that improved service to end users as well. There are opportunities for people to put up kind of a temporary a loaner program with their assets. Many times organizations lose a lot of assets when they loan them out, but there's a very well documented way of setting that up and having people have loaner devices, and that could be for a day, or it could be for a week, and then it's attributed to them until it's returned, and so it's very well tracked. And so just building those type of environments where people can use things but they're tracked is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Adam, I got a quick question for you as we transition. What are the elements of the full technology life cycle? Does this cycle apply to all companies? Will you expand on that?
Yeah, the life cycle is interesting because these things are just kind of natural occurrences with all assets, and that means they can be, in the case here, we're showing more of a hardware asset management life cycle, and that's because we have inventory. Normally, there might be a life cycle that's applied to software. There are times when you want to retire software. You want to track it through its full life cycle and then retire it. And then there's assets that are, there's life cycles that apply, and they're much quicker with cloud resources as well. And so these things really apply to all the assets, but it's also the different stages that you can automate. So if you create automation between each one of those cycles, it helps manage all of those things without a lot of minutia for those people who manage assets. And you can see kind of some of the call outs there of what somebody needs during the life cycle. And as you go through the stages from the request it to the fulfill it to pulling things out of inventory, deploying it, monitoring it during its life cycle and servicing it, and then the retirement of it as well. So it's interesting, but there's also a journey to this. This is kind of a thing that you can automate, but when we look at the journey of an asset through its life cycle, it looks more like this, and kind of looks like a spaghetti noodle, I guess. So through there. So you've got things like self-service where people are requesting the assets. You've got the onboarding where the person, I think Terry mentioned some of the things that you would do with the onboarding and making that kind of a zero-touch onboarding. You've got visibility into the asset, whether it's on the network. You've got different controls that you would put on it to control risks and to monitor risks. You would have the availability of it, talking about risks. So if it's a critical process, you'd want to map that to your infrastructure and make sure that those critical services are running on things that aren't coming down. And you've got the business applications and making sure that you're not overlapping different things. You've got intelligence that's coming back from different things like AI and machine learning. You've got the impact that has through change management. And when you're looking at it from a security standpoint, every asset has some kind of vulnerability, and it's the ability to look at that and understand who has it, where it is, what vulnerabilities do exist on it. And then if you're managing things against ISO standards, then having those checks and controls in place as well. And then as you come to the end of the life cycle, the end of that journey, you have the end of life or end of service of that, and then the decommissioning of it. So it's important to really get that right. If you click to the next one, Rachel, you'll see that this is the interesting thing. If you're looking at this from the top down or from any of the people who are managing this entire process or teams that do this, there are several different teams that touch these assets along the way. And the problem becomes if you're not tracking that data through all of these processes, you end up creating a lot of problems downstream. And so you can see that from service management to operations management, asset management, risk, security, the whole portfolio, looking at the portfolio, those things all apply and those teams apply. And it's important to have that clean information, concise information about what's going on with the asset. Now, it's interesting, I talked about decommissioning things. We have a customer who at the time wasn't a customer, a big banking group, and they made the news. And the reason they made the news was they had disposed of some laptops, and it wasn't very many. It was only a few. And they thought it wasn't much of a risk to them. It was only a few. They weren't going to get dinged. But when it went to court and they fought it through court, what happened was the court found them negligent. And you don't ever want to hear the word negligent in court, because that just is going to cost you millions of dollars and million. When I say millions, I'm underestimating. It was millions and millions of dollars. And you might say, well, that's a little bit much for a handful of laptops. But the court didn't think so because they didn't have a process in place. They didn't have an asset management process in place. And that came back to bite them in a big way. So they are a customer of ours now, and I don't think they'll ever have that problem again. And they document everything that goes is decommissioned. So anyway, if you click on the next one, it just shows that there are other areas. You know, if you see some of those yellow dots there associated with the risks, you can put other controls in there or watch those things more closely. And so if you're a risk averse organization, it's important to put asset management in place so you can tie them together. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Terry, you want to add?
Yeah, I think this is great, Adam. I do think the asset lifecycle is more a bowl of spaghetti than a donut. So I think this really does a good job of demonstrating that. It's kind of amusing, you know, when you talk about decommissioning. In my previous life as a practitioner, I was very, very much on everybody about the way they disposed of IT assets. So I had my team, they knew that, you know, if they walked by a trash receptacle and they seen something in it that looked like an IT piece of equipment, that they had to get it out. They had to report it. They had to come back and say, you know, who threw this away, so that we could reach back out to those departments and make sure they were educated about why you cannot throw. If it looks like it could be IT related, just send it back to your ITAM team. They know how to dispose of that properly to protect your organization from the risk that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So that's a really important part. I also think this really outlines when we say ITAM does not stand alone. It is connected to everything that your organization is doing in some way.
Yeah, and just to add to that, if your organization is looking at ESG or environment, social, and governance, that environmental thing comes into that decommissioning of assets, and being able to manage those and have a process is important. But it's also, we talked about the employee experience before. There is now data that's being passed on by the manufacturers that in asset management can be, you know, you can have your catalog, your service catalog, and you can select devices based on their footprint. And so that's another way that data can come into play to change the experience for employees, so that they know that they're having an impact, as well as on the back end when the device is being decommissioned and either destroyed or recycled or something like that. So yeah, good points.
Yeah, absolutely.
Terry, will you walk us through the process of implementing an ITAM solution? Will you talk about the steps, the timing?
Sure. So we'll talk about it pretty high level, because if we wanted to really get into it, you know, it would take days on how to really implement a full ITAM solution. So at a high level, let's talk about, you know, the critical components. There are two that everyone thinks of, you know, it's your ham and your SAM. And then a lot of people may even think of CMDB when they're talking about an ITAM program. And the one that's less known is common data, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. So when we talk about the CMDB and how it supports your ITAM program, you know, your hardware devices, they're discovered, they're brought in through a discovery source, be that SCCM or Discovery. It reports on who's using it, when was it last used, how is it configured, that type of information that supports your ham program. And for software, so software is installed on a configuration item. It's not installed on your asset. So it has to come in through your CMDB and your discovery sources. And CMDB supports SAM, because then you know, what do I have installed in my environment? What devices is it installed on? Who is using it? How often are they using it? What version is it? All of those things that are required for software compliance are coming in through your CMDB, through your software installations. When we talk about ham, of course, that's hardware models. What are approved in my environment? What are my standards? How much do they cost? What are their warranty dates? And how am I managing my hardware lifecycle to support my software program? And then, of course, your software is, what software do I own? Who is authorized to use it? How much did it cost? When did I purchase it? When was it installed? What are the known support dates? So all of the information that allows you to proactively manage the life cycle of your assets. And then when we get into common data, so we're going to talk more about that in detail because it's one that people don't really think of. So if you want to go to the next slide, Rachel, we'll talk about the common data and really what that is. So common data is defined in the ServiceNow CSCM Foundation domain. And they're the tables that have your company's business units, departments, locations, groups, and users. And common data is critical for everything else within your platform. But I feel like it is often the most overlooked and undermanaged area. And it can really lead to a lot of headache further down the road as you move into your ITAM program. So this is just, from ServiceNow, it talks about that these are not configuration management database tables. These are critical referential data, and they are required before you use ServiceNow products or add data to the CMDB. So that's really how critical they are. They really come first in your platform. And I think that final sentence there, that many ServiceNow products depend on common data to provide business value. I think that's one of the most important statements. In fact, that's why we say, let's read that again. Many ServiceNow products depend on common data to provide business value. So if you want to go to the next slide, we will talk about how common data really ties into your IT asset management program. So, I can tell you all day long that it's important, but until you really start questioning, how is it important? How does it relate to my ITAM program? You're really not going to understand the value there. So when you're talking about common data as it relates to your ITAM program, ask yourself things like, do I have requirements to report on assets within a specific group, such as company or department? Chances are the answer is yes. In order to do that, though, you have to have your common data structure set up so that it will support that. And the second one is pretty easy, most people think. So what levels of approval are needed? Well, if you just need a manager's approval, your user table has to be set up like that. If you have more advanced approvals, then your data structure has to support that. And another one that's very common is, do I have tax reporting that depends on location? Good chance that if you're national, you do. But if you don't know the in-use location of your assets, it's going to be a very painful process to provide that data back. So again, this is one I think most people overlook, and we come in to do an ITAM program and have just roadblock after roadblock because the things you need to do to support your business have not been set up in that common data structure. So Adam, before we move on into the steps, is there anything else you'd like to talk about as far as elements or common data?
Well, I think it's important when you're setting it up to understand the different sources. So we call it a multi-source CMDB. And so those different areas where you're pulling data in through either service graph connectors or something else, like you said, SCCM, then you need to make sure that you have that structure so you understand what the priority is of those things coming in, so that they don't overwrite themselves. Or let's say that the data that's being scanned from the network is more accurate or a higher priority than those coming in from a financial system, that type of thing. And so it's important to structure it that way so that on an ongoing basis, you have good, clean data.
Terry, you want to go ahead and talk about the steps? I think you're muted.
Well, it would help if I unmuted. All right. So we're going to talk about kind of the steps, not necessarily in any order. And in fact, if we were going to, ITS Partners was going to recommend anything, we would recommend you jump down to the very bottom step and you start there. So to contact us and let us help you with your program implementation. But these are really, they're not steps to a technical implementation, but it's the things you really need to do prior to moving into a technical implementation. So of course you need to define your scope of your initial phases for ITAM, as well as what your additional phases are. So are you going to start with hardware? Of course, that's the recommended approach because software depends on hardware to be successful. Are you going to start with end user compute? And then what is your next phase? Are you going to move into additional hardware classes, or then are you going to start moving into your software? So really just understanding where you're going to start, where you're going to go next for your implementation is very important. And you'll see results much quicker with a carefully planned phased approach than just by saying, I'm going to do everything all at once. Do not recommend that approach whatsoever. It's very important to phase that out, understand what you're doing, build a baseline that then you can expand on as you mature your program. Of course, we're going to talk about common data again and the CMDB. Carefully plan your data sources. And when you're talking about data sources that are going to come into your platform, ask yourself questions like, do I have trusted source for this data? Do I have multiple data sources? How often does the data change? Do I have the depth of data that business requires? So those questions we asked ourselves about locations and approvers. Do I have the depth of data that is going to be needed to meet those requirements for my business? And who maintains this data? That one is very, very often overlooked. You know, you'll see organizations, they set up their common data. They say, okay, we're going to get the data from this source. We're going to populate our platform with it. And then they never do anything else. You have to maintain the data. You have to have a process in place to make sure that it's staying current and that it's staying accurate so that you have trustworthy data to build your program on. I do have a note here that, you know, if you've been using ServiceNow platform for a while, chances are you already have your data sources in place. And what you need to do at that point is do a very careful review of those data sources. Make sure that you've addressed all of these questions. Make sure that the common data is set up as you need it to support your business needs and your ITAM program. Definitely not last and definitely not least is developing processes to manage your HAM and SAM lifecycle. This is something that you need to be doing well prior to an actual implementation. You need to be defining what those life cycles are. You need to be writing the processes for them. You need to include things like clearly defined roles and responsibilities. You need to identify your daily, weekly, monthly, yearly tasks for program maintenance and who's going to be responsible for doing those. And then, of course, again, you know, contact ITS partners and we will help you with your program implementation. And we can help you along every step of the way, whether it's reviewing your common data to make sure it meets your needs, checking your CMDB data, making sure your data sources are coming in properly. If you have multi-source, what is your trusted sources? What's your data precedence? All of the things that are going to be required to have a successful ITAM program.
Yeah,
Adam, anything you want to talk about there?
Well, you mentioned a couple things that are really important. One is don't try to do it all. We talk about kind of that data foundation in all the different areas, but you don't have to put all of those things in place before you can get the results, and then start leveling up by including some of those other organizations like security and risk and ITAM or other things like that. You can build it in a certain area and start with, software asset management or hardware asset management, kind of build those foundations and build the maturity in those if you want. Or you can kind of build it wide and try to implement one and then the next one, the next one. So there are different ways to go about it, but don't try to do it all at once. It's just a futile type thing. So that's what I would add to that conversation, just to emphasize that again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, is that it from you too before I move on to questions?
Yep, I think so.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for your valuable insight on these important topics and questions. I would like to get the audience involved now and see if they have any questions for you guys. So audience, feel free to use the Q&A button to submit your questions. You can use the chat function as well. I'll go ahead and read those off to our presenters. So go ahead and add in your questions. It looks like one came through during the conversation, which is great. So you've touched on this, but someone asked, do I need to implement the entire life cycle at one time, or can I do it in phases?
You got it. Phases.
Yeah, phases,
Do it in
definitely.
phases. There's a reason why there are phases in the life cycle. There are reasons why there would be phases in an implementation. And I think you'll find, I think we even have a white paper about how to implement the phases of like the software asset management life cycle.
I will add also that implementing in phases is definitely recommended, but it's also very important to understand your life cycle in its entirety first, because there's going to be so many places that tie together, like Adam showed, with his journey slides. So you don't want to start at the beginning and only understand the beginning. You really want to understand from the beginning to the end, and then start at the beginning, so that as you build on your program, you're making sure that you meet the needs of what's going to come next.
Great point. I did want to mention something from the last slide. You don't have to flip back to it, but the idea that some organizations have hired asset managers and others like that to manage certain aspects of it, but they haven't hired enough people to really watch the data, people who are managing the CMDB and other things like that. And that's probably best practice to have somebody with a primary responsibility over that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where it's important to define what those daily, weekly tasks are and who's going to be responsible for doing them, so you can maintain your data.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Terry, next question that came through. I think you touched on this, but if I want to implement both hardware asset management and software asset management, in what order should I implement them? There's a lot of confusion on what should come first.
Yeah, so which comes first, right? There's a lot of confusion out there. I will tell you, from a practitioner standpoint and from understanding how the different programs work together, that you need hardware lifecycle processes in place to have a successful SAM implementation. That doesn't mean you have to implement a full, HAM Pro. Of course, that would be our recommendation, but it means that you have to understand when your hardware is going in use, who it's going to be assigned to, when is it going to be retired, because all of those are key components in your SAM program. When you talk about SaaS, it's a little bit different, right? That's all in the cloud. It's all subscription. It's all user-based. You can get a lot more benefit out of SaaS without having a solid HAM program. But if you're ready to move into your SAM on-prem, which is what it's called, you absolutely have to have hardware management practices in place.
And I would add that coming back from different customers, it's a little bit easier to implement HAM to begin with than it is software asset management. There's more dynamics involved. And so, as you mentioned, Terry, you can have that data in place, and it's part of the CMDB, and it's part of like service management. But when you want to leverage the workflows, and you want to do the automation, and you want to do different things like that, that's where there's that step up to HAM professional or hardware asset management professional. So that's when you really get a lot of leverage there with your data. But I would say HAM, when we came out with hardware asset management, it was one of those toss-ups because people were already deploying software asset management, and they thought they just had to continue doing that, right? Software asset management, and then they can just deploy hardware asset management. But pretty soon it came out that it was a little bit easier to start the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. Software is definitely the more complex of the elements of an ITAM program.
And then at the highest level of the software asset management, you also have cloud resources. So you can manage different cloud resources with Cloud Insights. And that's part of that package too. So it's really part of the software asset management family.
Yep, agree.
Kind of continuation of this question. Someone asked, if I have limited women or manpower, what's the best place to start? HAM, SAM, CMDB?
was the question HAM, SAM, or CMDB?
Yep. What's the best place to start? HAM, SAM, or CMDB if you have limited manpower?
Terry, I'm gonna place my bets on what Terry's gonna say on this one. I'm thinking something, but let's see if she says it.
So when we talked about the elements, right? CMDB is critical. You have to have the data in there for your HAM and your SAM program to work. And when you talk about SAM specifically, software installations, like I said, software is not installed on an asset. Software is installed on a CI. The only way you're going to know what is installed in your environment is through your CMDB and that software installation table. So if we'll take a step back. If all you want to do is SaaS and you are a complete SaaS environment, then you could probably do SAM and be okay. If you want a complete and mature program, you need to have your CMDB first. Actually, we'll take a step back. You have to have your common data in place. You have to have that structure set up that's going to support everything for your CMDB and HAM and SAM. Then you have to have your CMDB data. You have to have your CMDB, your CIs being populated so that you know where your hardware devices are at, who's using them, what's installed on them in order to have a mature ITAM program.
Well, I won my bet. I figured Terry would say that it was the CMDB. If you're putting, a person on something, the CMDB is something to really, she mentioned it's critical. It's the foundation of if you're going to build across and build a whole program. I would say, though, that the purpose of software asset management and hardware asset management, those workflows and those automations, then you can get more mileage for your resources. In other words, a lot of those things will be automated. And so if you're thinking it's just going to take, another person, you could probably have one person watching both, depending on the size of the organization and stuff like that. So the whole purpose of those is to automate and to make it easier. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I win my bet.
All right.
Well done. We have another one that came in. So they said, we are very immature in our hardware process area. We don't have some process, we do have some process, but it isn't documented very well. And many don't even know what is recommended. So how do you recommend beginning to work on this? And is this something ITS can help with?
So of course, ITS can help with that. Absolutely. We have years and years, decades really, of practitioner level experience in our ITAM practice. We really try to make sure that the people that we bring in have been in your shoes so that they can help you with your journey. We've been there, we've done that, we've built ITAM programs, and we understand how to build them within the ServiceNow platform. To say how would you get started, really there's, and we actually have a white paper that'll be coming out soon on how do you do ITAM, where it really kind of walks you through those basics of understanding the life cycle. So as we've talked about, life cycle. So starting, with your planning phase of your hardware asset life cycle, what models are going to be in my environment? Who is going to be the one that determines what those models are? How are people going to be able to request them? How are they going to be fulfilled? Really walking through that life cycle and asking the questions that are relevant to build your processes around that life cycle is the best place to get started.
I like it. All right, we do have time for one more. That question is, I'll pass to you, Adam. How robust is the reporting feature built into the ITAM tool? And then will I get a true picture of my ROI over time?
That's a good question. All the data that you have, you can export and put into any type of reporting type system. So that is available to you. However, there are dashboards and workspaces that you live in and work in that are important for each organization or each person that's managing a different aspect. But the coolest thing, I think I may have even sent over a slide just recently with the latest release. A lot of asset managers and directors and others were looking for a way to a way for executives to be able to look at all the assets in their environment and be able to drill down and answer questions and help them in some of their strategies and see trends. It's the asset management executive dashboard. And so this will include, if you have software asset management, hardware asset management, and cloud insights as part of this, you can see different trends. And you can see the way things are being used. You can see pretty much anything about your assets. Now, there are individual dashboards and workspaces in those different areas for for instance, in hardware asset management. But there's also the ability to define what success looks like and track things, KPIs and other things like that. So you can track your success. And again, that's something to present to your executives, but it's also something that any practitioner, anyone along that line of chain of command will probably find a great deal of interest in. So I think this is kind of the ultimate thing to say, here's what you can get. And I don't think anybody else can provide this type of depth, this kind of breadth of asset management in one place. So
yeah, I agree with that. I know this dashboard that we're looking at here, this was new in Tokyo, I believe. So really excited about it. It does give that overall holistic view of your asset management program and more at that executive level of, what data points are they going to be interested in. I know ServiceNow has greatly expanded on dashboards and workspaces over the past several releases. And, typically in an implementation, a couple years ago, you were building a lot of reports for customers because they just weren't there. And as each release comes out, ServiceNow is putting more and more of those reports into dashboards and workspaces so that all of the data is literally right there on one screen. You can click into it, you can drill down into the actual data. So ServiceNow is definitely listening to their customer base about what they need to see, and they're taking it seriously. And I think this asset management executive dashboard is a perfect example of that.
yeah. And you get this if you have software asset management pro or above, and you have hardware asset management pro, then you'll start seeing these type of things. But it doesn't, obviously, if you don't have at least two, you're not going to see that boil up thing. You'll just see the dashboards for the individual ones.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you to our panelists for your insight. Thanks to our audience too for jumping on and spending some time with us. If you would like to discuss your ITAM needs with us, please reach out to us. We'd love to connect. Terry loves talking about this, very passionate. We'd love to share our knowledge and experience. So go ahead and scan the QR code, or you can visit www.itsdelivers.com/contact, and let's start the conversation.